Hello and welcome to a tutorial about how to program a loading animation on a page in JavaScript using p5.js. So I have a p5.js sketch here. All it renders is this gray square. It doesn't do anything yet. But when I run it, you'll notice it says loading there, and then the sketch pops up, and it took 1,355 milliseconds, or about 1.4 seconds. Did I round that correctly? I'm not sure. So what's going on here? So p5.js actually has built into itself, if there are things to be loaded before the sketch runs, a sort of automatic loading display. So that sort of comes up automatically. The reason why that comes up is because in the code, I'm using this function called preload. So preload is a function that's designed to operate synchronously, meaning the rest of the code, the setup function, won't actually be triggered until everything that needs to be loaded in preload is done. So images, sounds, JSON files, data files, videos, all sorts of media or data assets that you might load, you can load those things in preload and then know that they're ready to be used when setup and draw continue. Now, this is very convenient for like quick and dirty testing, for I just have a couple images, whatever. You don't have to worry about callbacks and asynchronous this and that and whatever. And but once you're maybe, two reasons why this might not be so great for you is, number one, you might actually have a ton of stuff to load that it takes seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7 seconds for the sketch to load, and you want to see other things start while stuff is loading in the background. That's one thing I'm going to show you how to do. The other thing is just, as you release something onto the web, maybe you just don't want the users to kind of see this default loading thing for a little bit and want to customize and do something special yourself. So that's what I'm going to look at. How do I take things that are loaded in how do I take things that are loaded in preload and load them asynchronously so that a callback can register when they're loaded and have other things animate at the same time? Okay, I got distracted by looking at a live chat that's going on. I'm not going to look at it anymore while I complete this video. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go back to the code. And actually, honestly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you eventually what I can do in terms of all of these images and multiple MP3 files. But I'm going to simplify for a second. And I'm going to comment out some of this stuff. And I'm just going to load, I'm just going to have one MP3 file load. Okay, so let's run this again. And we can see that one MP3 file took about 811 milliseconds to load. So one thing I want to do is let's come up with some goofy loading animation. So I'm going to do something really quickly. I'm going to say translate width divided by 2, height divided by 2. I'm going to draw a line from 0, 0 to like 100, 0. I'm going to say the stroke weight is 4 and the stroke is 255. And then I'm also going to rotate by some angle, and I'm going to have that angle increase over time. Now, I am making perhaps a rather uninteresting loading animation. I just want like a spinning line. But this video is not about making an interesting animation, loading animation. It's just about where to place it and how to deal with it. And then I hope to see all of your exciting, different, creative, rainbow-colored loading animations on the internet after you watch this video. So if I run this, you can see, now notice that animation came up after, right? Because this happens in draw. Draw starts after. So this is my loading animation, a little spinning line, nothing too fancy. So if I were to not load this song, you can see it comes up basically immediately. So now, what if I were to take this load sound code and put load sound now in setup? Notice there is no delay anymore. When you call, a loading function that you call in preload, it has to wait and finish before it goes to setup. A loading function that you call in setup does not stop and wait before it goes to draw. It goes to draw immediately. So how do you know, right? If I were to say this, song1 equals load sound, and then I were to say song1.play, why did these get sort of strangely colored? I don't know what Adam is doing to syntax highlight this stuff, but I'm not going to worry about that. If I run this, you can see this is the error I'm going to get. It's not ready to play the file because it hasn't loaded yet. So the way that this works, and I have some other videos about this, is with this idea of a callback. So I can write a callback here that's called something like sound loaded. So I can add a second argument to the load function, and this is the same for load image, load JSON. I can add that second function, and here I can write that, there's lots of different ways I could write the function, embed it in there anonymously, but I'm just going to make it a separate function outside here. And it's going to have, it has an argument, which is the sound object that actually was loaded. And I'm going to say song1 equals song. I'm just going to do this for right now. And then I'm going to say song1.play. And now we should see, do you hear it? There should be a song playing. It's got a little like record scratch at the beginning. So you can see that song, as soon as it's loaded, that thing is spinning. And there was like a little pause there. Now, that hiccup really shouldn't be there. I wonder why that hiccup is there. So it's interesting to sort of like examine and debug that. The whole point of what I'm doing is to avoid a hiccup like that. But let's see. What I could now do is I could create a variable like finished loading. Or let me just create a variable called loading. And I'm going to set that variable equal to true. And I could say here in draw, if loading, draw this loading animation. Otherwise, I'm just going to do a green background like everything is loaded. So what I can actually do is I can put in the callback that plays the song, I can say loaded equals true. So I start with a Boolean variable. Oh, no, sorry, it's called loading. Loading equals false. So I start with a loading variable equal to true. So while that's true, I draw the spinning animation. And then at some point in the callback, when loading is finished, I set that to false, and draw then switches to the other animation. So let's go back and see. Spinning, spinning, green. And the music starts. Green. Okay, so now here's the thing. So that's part one. There's actually a bit more to it than this. Let's just see something kind of exciting. I'm pretty sure I need a stop button. I'm going to mute the tab just for a second so it doesn't play the song. Now, there's another aspect to this. I'm pretty sure that the sound library, when you pass it a callback like sound loaded, you can actually give it a third callback. I think you can give it a third callback, which is like, maybe I'll call it progress. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to have to look in the reference a second if I get this wrong. But I can write another function called progress. And that callback is triggered continuously, giving you a percentage of the amount that's loaded. So I'm just going to put console log percent to see if this works. No. So let's go and look at the p5.js reference. Sound file. And I'm going to go and look for success callback, error callback, and while loading callback. So I think if I want to use this while loading callback, I need to also give it an error callback, which is useful to have as well. So I'm going to do like error, and now I just need a function error. And I can just, if there were an error, like the file didn't exist, I could log that error. So here I'm getting kind of like ballooning my code, which is why when you're just kind of like sketching out ideas, you don't necessarily want to do all of this stuff. But when you get to a finishing stage of a project and you want to kind of like add some nice features, you can start adding all this stuff. So I have a callback. There's three kinds of events. There's, I loaded the song successfully. There was an error. The song didn't load. And then there's a callback that's like, it's loading, it's loading, it's the loading song. It's loading, it's loading, it's the loading song. So let's see if this works now. Right, you can see, this like, let's be a little bit more thoughtful about this. So I'm going to say percent times 100, and I'm going to floor it. Why did I get negative 308 and then 229? That is crazy. Let's look at the documentation. I'm not sure if I either made a mistake or there's a bug in P5. So while loading callback, name of the function to call while is loading. That function will receive a percentage loaded between 0 and 1 as a parameter. So I believe that I have done this correctly, and that I should get, I should get, oh, percent, I spelled percent wrong. I should get, so I'm going to investigate that later. I'll probably at the end of this video, you might see an addendum where I fix that, because I'll go and debug that and then edit that back on later. But I'm just going to keep going, although what I was going to demonstrate to you, okay, pause, I'm going to debug this. I'm back and I couldn't figure out that error, so I'm going to have to look at it later and file some sort of like follow-up video to this, but I'm going to keep moving in this tutorial. So what I'm going to do right now is actually take out that progress thing. Since it's not working for me, I'm not going to use it in this particular, but I'm going to show you some other stuff, and I'm just going to go back to sound loaded. And I'm going to do this, and we're going to see, okay, so this is working. Now, here's the thing. What if I have two sounds, song 1 and song 2? So now what I need to do is do song 1 and song 2. So, you know, they should be different, two different songs, but actually the computer doesn't know. Like, I just telling it to load the same MP3 file, it's going to take a while. So the issue is, what if I want both of those to have the same callback? But I want the correct one to play when it's loaded, and I want to keep track of the total number of things loaded. Oh my goodness, yikes. This is actually a time, I walked into a sort of treacherous area here, but this is a time where using a JavaScript closure would actually be something quite useful. So I'm going to actually create a function that's called, I'm going to call it rainbow song load, rainbow song, and I'm going to pass it song 1 and rainbow.mp3. You'll see what I'm going to do in a second. And I'm going to call that function again. Now, these should really be like two different MP3 files, but I'm just going to use one MP3 file for right now. You'll see in a minute why I'm doing this. So I have a separate function. What I want to do is say, I want the variable song1 to go with this MP3 file. And you know what I'm going to do? This is, even though it's the same music, what I'm going to do is, hold on, reveal in Finder, show in Finder. This is going to make things much less confusing. I'm actually just going to create two versions of the file, because what you actually would be doing is if you want to load two songs. Okay? So now there are two different MP3 files. For all you know, they're two different songs. And what I'm going to do here, right, I have a two that I want to load. So I'm creating a function called rainbow song. And in that function, what does that function take? Rainbow song. It takes a variable like song, and it takes a file name. And what I want to do is I want to load that file into that particular variable name, and then know that it's loaded and play that particular variable. So here, in other words, now this load sound function needs to then go inside that function. Okay? And what am I loading? I'm actually loading this file name now. So I just created a wrapper function to call the load sound function and be able to receive the file name as an argument. Why? Because now what I can do is in this sound loaded function, I can say song equals that particular sound, right? This is a closure. I now have access to either the variable song1 or song2. I have a whole video just about this concept that you can go and look. And now what I can do is I can say song.play. So in other words, I was able to here, if I say song1 equals load sound, sound loaded, song2 equals load sound, sound loaded, and this is my sound loaded function, I have no way to know when that callback happens, which file was it. But here, I now know how to do that, because I have then instead taken the load sound away and made that happen in my own function that receives arguments. This is essentially how you pass arguments to a callback. I pass arguments to a function that then defines the callback within that function, so I have access to those arguments, and that's a JavaScript closure. This function is enclosed in that other function. Okay, that's a bit of a side topic here, but it's kind of necessary for this type of thing that you might be doing. There's an error. I made a mistake. I'm missing a semicolon somewhere. Yes, thank you very much. This is an error. The chat thankfully saved me there. So I'm going to put that. I think I've got everything right now. So what I want to do, forget about the loading animation for a second. What I want to do now is I just want to do this. Console.log file name. So here I'm going to be able to see the file that was loaded. Run this. Rainbow 1. So you can see those files. I now have access to when they're loaded separately. And I get this like weird little pause when the first one loads in my animation. I don't know why that's happening. The whole point of doing this is to eliminate that. But OK, so I've got my loading animation going. And now what I can do is I could have a counter. You know, I really should be using an array. Let's use an array. Yeah, let's use an array. That's how you would do it probably. I'm going to make this an array. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say 0, 1. So I'm just going to pass in an index into the array. Those should be named rainbow 0, rainbow. And then what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to say songs index, and this is now an index. Songs index equals sound. And I'm going to say console.log index plus file name. And then songs index. So now I have an array of sounds, and only 2 of them. And you can see they're being loaded separately, 0 and 1. So now I could easily have something like a counter, right? So I could say counter equals 0. And here, whenever the song is loaded, I could say, you know, counter plus plus. And I could say if counter equals 2, then loading equals false. So now I know only stop the loading animation actually only stop the loading animation after I've loaded everything. And there we go. So you can see it's loading them one at a time. And it's loading them one at a time. Okay. Pause, edit point. OK, I'm back. And what I'm going to do now is improve the code with a few cleanup things, as well as show you how to have a loading bar kind of go through the percentages as a bunch of things are loading. So while I was taking a quick break there, what I did is I added 10 songs to a folder. So now what I want is for this sketch to load all 10. So there's a bunch of improvements I can do here. Number 1 is I can have a variable called total songs, and that's going to be equal to 10. The other thing I could do is I really don't need to call this individually with passing in the index. I can really just write a loop right now. I could say for var I equals 0, I is less than the total songs, I plus plus. And really all I need to do now is I don't need that index. I can just say, let me dynamically make that file name. Let's leave the index there for right now, because I'll show you why you may or may not want to use it. And I can just put, I in the file name. So this is me saying, like, instead of saying load rainbow 1, load rainbow 2, I'm saying loop through I going from 0 up to 10, and loop and do rainbow I, which is rainbow 0, rainbow 1, rainbow 2. That's a song, rainbow 0, rainbow 1. OK, so now we should see 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, notice it stopped. It thinks it loaded after it got just through 2. That's because I have this counter here. And really, I need to say when this counter equals total songs now that I have that as a variable. So now I can say it's loading 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then it's finished loading. So I'm doing pretty well here. And let's see, let's make a few more improvements there. Now, one thing is, I don't actually need this index here. I can get rid of the index here, because one thing I could just do, and I'm going to keep the file name here, is I can just say songs.push sound. And that'll just say anything that's coming in, push it onto the array. But there is a slight issue with this. Let's see. Well, first of all, the issue is that nothing. I'm loading forever, loading forever. What did I miss here? Oops, I have index still here as an argument where I just want file name now. And you can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow. So what I was really expecting to happen is for those not to come in order. They did come in order, which is kind of lucky, but there's no way to guarantee that they're going to happen in order. If you care about the order of those things in the array, then you're going to want to keep the index as you're calling the load function, but in this case, it didn't really matter. So what I'm going to do now is do something really, really simple. In addition, is I'm going to say, OK, I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to make a stroke of 255, and I'm going to have no fill. And I'm going to draw a rectangle from 1010 to 500 across. That's 20 pixels high. Let's just see that there. Oops, that's way too wide. Still too wide. OK, so you can see now I have a rectangle up at the top. And then what I want to do is draw a rectangle with no stroke. And I want to give it a fill, like 255, and maybe with some alpha. And then I want to draw that same rectangle, but I want the width to be a variable. So if I do this, for example, and just give that width equal to mouse x, look, as I move my mouse around, that rectangle, there's a rectangle inside the outer one. And now, since I have that counter, I can say that is something like 200 times the counter divided by total songs, right? Because counter is counting up how many total songs, and we should be able to see here, as they're loading, you can see the progress of that loading bar moving forward. Ooh, okay, I like this. This will be like a GIF animation, the loading song. Loading, 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 loaded. Okay. All right, so that's how to program a loading animation in p5.js. Instead of using preload, which I've now commented out, you can call things in setup with callbacks. You can keep track of when the callbacks are finished. You can put things into an array. You can use a closure to keep track of a whole bunch of things with the same callback. There's a lot to this, but hopefully this gave you some JavaScript learning and information and was helpful. Make a nicely designed, more beautiful, rainbow-colored, perhaps, loading animation. Share it with me, and I would love to check it out. Okay, thanks for watching this video, and there may be an addendum on it. I'm not sure just yet, or this might be the end. I don't know. It'll be a mystery. It's a mystery. It's a mystery. Oh, I need a soundboard really badly. Goodbye, maybe.